So today we're going to be covering chapter 11, and this has to do with outliers. So typically before we looked at outliers, you said a lot of times we're gonna kind of ignore these guys. So and as we talk about outliers, actually I'll back up a second here. So we're basically going to look at these data sets graphically and look at these outlier points and then make conclusions about that. Specifically, we're going to go through a case study on a call center. So we're going to look at call center employees that have to answer a certain amount of calls, and they're tracking things like, hey, are you taking Fridays off? On swing shifts, are you volunteering to take other people's swing shifts? Or if somebody needs vacation, or are you going to be that person that's always taking and not giving back? And then how are you doing on like professional development? Are you doing things outside of the job? So as we look at these outliers then, before we said, hey, these outliers, especially on a bell curve, it could start skewing our curve. So if you have a bell curve, we could say, hey, if you get some outliers in here, you could start getting some skewing here. So a lot of times we want to look and find outliers and actually pull them out. We don't want them to skew our data, especially on these machine learning models. That kind of creates havoc with those guys. And by pulling out our outliers, a lot of times we're going to get a cleaner data analysis, modeling, and better conclusions. However, has anybody ever been called by their credit card company before saying, hey, are you making these purchases or not making these purchases? So tell us about that, Brian.
Well, I was in LA, and they were just saying how I had a couple random purchases in LA that weren't. I think I bought something that I don't usually buy because I bought it from my cousin.
Yeah.
He needed it. It was like some contact solution or something. Just like some random stuff.
Yeah, so listen, so I think Brian used the word random like what, 2 or 3 times? Yeah. So when you say random, guess what that was?
It was like red flags.
There was like red flags, it was this outlier. So while most times we want to throw out things like outliers, sometimes our credit card companies are using specifically these outliers to say, hey, are you buying, when I was on this, over the summer, I was in taking a trip and we're in Utah, and my credit card called me up saying, hey, you're buying gas and all kinds of things in Utah. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're on vacation. And just so you know, we're going from Utah to Colorado. So if you start seeing things in Colorado, don't turn off the card. Has anybody else had anything? Did you, Anthony? You can tell, yeah. Does anybody else have a credit card ever call them up? But essentially what's happening is you will actually, these credit card companies will flag these purchases. And I have a 4-minute video that'll be part of your assignment this week to look at this 4-minute video and kind of summarize, like a 100-word summary, like a paragraph, and just summarize what this guy is saying in 4 minutes about credit card fraud. So I thought it was kind of cool and have you guys watch that video. All right, so as we look at these outliers, a lot of times our statistical packages within things like our programming that we're going to get through to the next chapter, that'll be our last and final chapter, chapter 12, we're going to move away from Excel into our programming. And this is what data analysts use most times to do data analytics, is our programming. So there's some statistical packages in there. And then we have these things called Tukey fences. And essentially these Tukey fences are based on box and whisker plots. Does everybody remember what we did before with the box and whisker plot? So we calculated what? The 25th percentile, the 75th percentile, and the 50th percentile. And we said that was our box. Okay? And we said if this is left, so what about if this line is over here? We can say, what about our data? We said it's going to be left skewed, and if our line was over here, we're saying it's going to be right skewed. So we're basically, so I wanted to cover the box and whisker plot way back when, because that's going to feed into this chapter. This is kind of what we're doing with these Tukey fences, and we said that this difference between the P75 and the P25, does anybody remember what that was called? If we take so that we could say this is going to be our first quartile, this is our third quartile, and this is our second quartile. The second quartile we could also say was our median. And we subtracted the 25th from the 75th. And that came up with our interquartile range. Everybody remember that? It's been what? It's been a while since we covered that, but we did cover it way back when. The interquartile range. And we said, hey, if we take 1.5 times this guy here, that's going to be our inner fences. And if we take 3.0, that's going to be an outer fence. So if you're outside the outer inner fence and inside the outer fence, that's kind of a mouthful, right? So essentially, if you're like right here, you're considered a mild outlier. If you're out here, you're considered an extreme outlier. If you have a normal set of data, about 1 in 100 is going to be about 1 in 100 is going to be an mild outlier, and then 1 out of 500,000 is going to be an extreme outlier. So any questions on this? So this is just, again, this is just that box and whisker plot that we talked about way back when, I think in chapter 2 or 4, somewhere over there. Okay, so we had our box, we had our whiskers, and we had, again, you'd have the lower, so this is the upper inner fence, upper outer fence, lower inner fence, lower outer fence. Okay, so that's our box and whisker plot. And then also you'll see it referred to as a 5-point summary or Tukey fences. All right, so let's go take a look at this pregnancy duration. So there's this case where this British general goes off to war, and he comes back and he's got a surprise. He's got a child, and he's like, wait a second, I'm doing the math here, and I've been gone for 9 months, and this is, so it's like, if you look at this, I've been gone for over 11 months, so I don't think that kid's mine. So it's like this big, huge court case that they went through. So let's go see, and we're going to go pretend to be Mr. Hadlam's lawyer here, and let's go see, does he have any credibility in his story? So let's pull up the, Hadlam, the pregnancy duration Excel spreadsheet. And let's go pretend to be Mr. Hadlam's lawyer, and let's see what we can come up with here. Only a little editing. All right, so if we take a look at this data, this is pregnancy. So we have 1,000 different pregnancies. So we have Mrs. Hadlam at the top at 349, and then we have 999 other pregnancies. So we have 1,000 pregnancies here that we're going to go analyze. Okay. So then the first thing we're going to do is we want to go find out the percentiles, because we're essentially going to set this up, this Tukey fences box whisker plot in Excel, and go look, and we're eventually going to get to the probability of her being pregnant for 349 days. So the first thing we want to do is we want to calculate the median. So in D1, that's going to give us, so we could do it 2 ways. The first way we can do it is just doing the median formula, or we said the 50th percentile is also going to be the what? That's going to be the median. So we'll just scrape this formula here, and then we'll put that in. Okay, so D1. Okay, so we're finding now that this center line on our plot is 267. So we'll start, actually, we'll just draw this box and whisker plot as we go along up here. So we're going to say, here's Mrs. Hadlam. Okay, so we're going to do an inner fence. lower inner fence, lower outer fence. We have upper inner fence, upper outer fence. So we're saying 267, that's going to be the mean, which if you think about it, that's what? It's approximately about 9 months, right? So if you take 30 days times 9, you get 270. So 267 is going to be our mean. Let's go do our first quartile. And that's going to be the 25th percentile. So we're just going to grab this formula here. And that's going to be in D2. And if you want to, you can grab that formula and just change the 0.25 to 0.75. That's going to be the third quartile. Okay. And then we set our, and so now we have, let's fill in some more here. So now we have 260 and 272. So we have 260 and 272. We have Mrs. Hadlam out here somewhere in the what, 349? So it's starting to look a little bit suspicious here. So here's our box plot. So we have 260 to 272. So it looks like, what do we have going on here? So what is going to be that spread then between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile? How many days is that? Should be 12. Should be 12, and we could just quickly subtract the third quartile from the first quartile. Okay, and then now let's go to the next slide, and then here's our formulas for our fences. But again, it's just going to be the interquartile, so essentially 12 in this case, times 1.5, that's going to give us our lower inner fence, and times 3 is going to give us our lower outer fence, and then the same thing up here. Okay, so let's go in D5. We're going to do this formula. So it's going to be D2, yep, and it's going to work better if I grab the equal sign too. All right, and then you just grab these formulas and we can talk about them really quick. But again, we're just doing the fences here. So this isn't looking good because Mrs. Hadlam's outside the upper inner fence. So we know she's at least a mild outlier now at 290. And then let's see what this one is. This is going to be the upper outer fence. So that's 308. So man, so we're seeing, so we're like, wait a second, Mrs. Hadlam here. What's going on? It's like, so we have 242. And we have 224, that's on the lower end, but we care more about this upper end. So we're saying this lower outer fence is 220, 290. And we're saying the upper outer fence is 308. And she's at 349, okay? So what we can do is we can do our normal distribution. We've kind of been using this for the cumulative distribution functions, and we can figure out the probability of how many children are born at 349 days or less. So that's going to be what we're doing in D10 here. So this, I'm suspecting, is going to give us 1 here. Okay, and then actually if you go out to if you increase the decimal places here, you can just see how extreme this is. So it's pretty much everything's born within 349 days. So what's the probability that Mrs. Hadlam really has a gestation period of 349? Well, you can just take 1 minus that number right there. So you can take 1 equals 1 minus this cell, and you're going to see that's pretty much 0%. Okay, so what can we say about Mrs. Hadlam here? Yeah, she's got a little bit of explaining to do because she's like an extreme outlier beyond anything else. So she's got to like, look, man, it's like 308. That's like you have 1 in 500,000 chance here, and you're like 31 days even beyond that. You're a month beyond that even. So like, I don't know. So it's like, I'm thinking.
Take it to Maury.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we better start doing, I don't know if they probably didn't have the DNA checks back then, but I'm sure a DNA check is like, yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah. So, yeah. So as we look at Tukey fences here, it's going to require us to have 3 conditions for us to calculate these Tukey fences. One is that the data is vaguely normally distributed. So essentially, as long as it has some bellness to it, it's going to be pretty good. And then we don't want any skewing. So the more it is towards a bell curve, the better. But even if it's skewed, you can still kind of work with it, as long as it's not outside the Chesbiums or that dude way back when we said 1 over k squared. So we said for non-normally distributed data. And we can say that the definition of an outlier is going to be an extreme value on the perimeter of the data. So basically, you're going to be out in here for outliers, and that we're looking at 1 dimension of data. So if we look at the book, again, this guy is all kind of into hobbits and swords and everything else. Kind of tells you about him. But he's a really brilliant, sharp dude. If you look at the movie The Hobbit, you had like all the hobbits. Those are like the small guys. And you had all the tall people, the humans. Then you have Gimli. He was like this elf in between them. So he's in between like the humans and the hobbits. So if you look at this, you could say that Gimli's an outlier here. So even though Gimli's like in the middle, Gimli's still an outlier because this is going to be multimodal. So when we say multimodal, we have like this section. Didn't want to do that. So we have this section of hobbits, and he's outside of that, and he's greater than the hobbits and less than the tall folks. So even though Gimli's in the average of all this data, he's still considered an outlier. So if you look, sometimes people will try to kind of just skate along to be normal, try to be in like the normalness. So essentially, has everybody heard of Bernie Madoff? What is Bernie Madoff? What's he famous for? Anybody know? Ponzi scheme, right? So he was basically taking money and saying he's investing it. So he's like, and this is back in what, the 90s or something like that, early 2000s, somewhere in there. So it's like all these guys in these Ponzi schemes, and they just basically pulled in people's money and gave return with other people's money. So basically just kind of like laundering money by pulling it in, saying, oh yeah, we got these investments, and they weren't paying out. But where a lot of these Ponzi schemes got into, right. It always what now? So it's just
Excel and PowerPoint just randomly closed.
Yeah.
And you go lose all your data sometimes.
Oh, really? Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know. Oh, wow. Sorry. Okay. So that's never happened here, and I thought I have the same image that you guys have. All right, so let me see. Getting back to our Ponzi schemes then, Bernie Madoff was smart enough to say, you know what, all these guys are getting at a point where returns are kind of small. A lot of these Ponzi schemes are getting like 20%. So you're like, how are you getting 20%? Because overall the market's like at 4%, 3%, somewhere in there. How are you giving a 20% return? So these other guys are kind of like outliers, and they were just like quickly getting sucked up and saying, hey, you've got funny business going on here. If you're offering 20% and the rest of the market's doing like anywhere between like 5%, there's some funny stuff going on here. But Bernie Madoff, he was smart enough to say, you know what, I just want to kind of blend in here. So Bernie's like, well, the market's given 5%. These other guys have 20%. If I just give like 7 or 8%, I can kind of give enough that people are going to give me money, but I can kind of fly underneath the radar, because if I'm at 20, they're going to say Ponzi scheme. But if I fly at the radar about 7 or 8, I can kind of get through here, and then nobody's going to even know what I'm going on. So it took a lot longer to find him versus others. So as long as you're kind of like blending in and not jumping these Tukey fences in here, a lot of times software isn't going to find it. but over time it will find it. And the same thing happens from a cybersecurity perspective. Does anybody know what an advanced persistent threat is? So I talked about that a little bit in 120, talked about a little bit, and I think 171. Anybody remember? So advanced persistent threats, this is like these nation states will go along and they'll do like these attacks over like months on end. So if somebody comes in, if you do like a big, huge attack and go through, you're going to set off all the intrusion detection systems and everything else. But if you slowly do a virus, then it's really hard to detect. The same thing happens. So if you think about this, what happens if you're working at a store, and let's say you had $1,000 of business that day, and somebody pulls out $100. They're going to say, what? Let's say we had $1,000, we're going to have $900 here. Who stole $100? Okay. What happens if you have a person every day you're selling, you have $100 or $1,000 in revenue, and maybe once or twice a week a person pulls $1 out. It's like, oh, that day we had 999. Don't worry about it. So what happens then is you're kind of flying underneath the radar. And the same thing happens from a virus perspective on these advanced persistent threats. So somebody's going to do something, so these attacks slowly over time, days, months, years, that they're able to get information, but they're not going to trip the data analytics software that's built into the intrusion detection systems. So kind of the same thing. So you see this example going, in multiple different areas. So we talked about Ponzi schemes, we talked about data analytics. So one of the things we can do here on these outliers is just like in chapter 7, we did our network graphing. We talked about, there were 2 models there. We said the K nearest neighbor method, and then there was the R neighborhood graph. For that chapter, we used the R neighborhood graph. So for this chapter, just to get exposure, we're going to use the K nearest neighbors. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this chapter. And just like in most chapters in this book, we'll look at 3 different models. We'll look at good, better, best kind of thing. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing today. All right. So if you guys want, you can but save the pregnancy data, and then you can load that up. Were you able to get caught up, Brian? Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so you can save that and then post that up. Let me save it to file, sales. All right. So now let's go in and pull up the support center data and take a look at this. So here's call center data on 400 employees. So this is like a big call center here. So we have 400 employees. Here's their IDs, kind of like their CERT numbers. And here's some of the things that this call center is tracking. For a person to be in the good graces of this company, they have to do 140 tickets per day, and their average customer rating has to be 2+. So that's going to be these first 2 columns of average tickets per day, their customer rating, but we're also going to track if a person's tardy getting into work, how many graveyard shifts they've taken, how many weekend shifts they've taken, how many days a person takes on a Friday, the employee professional development hours, then how many shift swaps they've requested, and then how many shift swaps they've actually offered and taken. So this is going to be how we rank our employees. So if you look at this, how do you find any good or bad employees in this? So that's essentially what we're going to be doing, is looking to see, is a person a good employee or a bad employee? Okay, so kind of interesting stuff. So again, these outliers can guide us on which employees are subpar, just getting by, if you have like one person, perhaps you lay that person off or put them on a personal improvement plan, a PIP, or if you have several persons that are doing this, perhaps you write some new policies and procedures that will convince, that'll make it so that these people change their behavior. All right, so moving on to slide 12 here. If we look at this data, we have kind of like dogs, cats, and pigs over here. We have average tickets per day, we have customer ratings, tardy, graveyard shifts taken. So we have all these different scales. So what might we do to have each one of these kind of equal to each other so they all have the same spread? We talked about this previously, I think. Does anybody remember? So we have this process called standardization, and what we'll do is we'll kind of normalize each to their data. So for example, we'll take the average tickets per day, and then we'll add all that up, and we'll find out what slice of a pie that is for a person, and divide that by the total number, and that'll give us a representative between like 0 and 1 for average tickets per day. And then we'll do the same thing for customer rating. That way, when you see these guys by each other, it's the same relativity for each one, even though in one column you have average tickets per day, customer ratings, and so on. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So so we need to. We need to go down to the next sheet. No, we're going to do the standard mean and the standard deviation here. And by doing that, we'll be able to do the standardization in the next sheet. So in B402, we're going to find the average. And then we're going to find the standard deviation. And then with these two values, we can use the standardized formula to go normalize these guys against each other. So once you have this data, we can just pull this across. Go over to column K, I think. Over to column K. Okay, so this gives us the mean and the standard deviation for each column. Once we take this and standardize it, now each one of these columns will be based on from 0 to 1. And it doesn't matter if it's the ratings versus tardies versus everything else. All right, so let's go on to slide number 13. And let's go unhide the standardized sheet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the standardized formula. And then what happens is we're going to select, our formula is going to grab the value, then it's going to grab the mean, and then it's going to grab the standard deviation, and it'll normalize everything across the scale. So this will, again, give us that between -1 down to 1, with 0 being kind of in the center there. So if we look at this formula, so let's copy this into B2, and we'll talk about the formula here. Okay, so what happens if we go down in this formula? B2 becomes what? B2 becomes B3, and that's good because we want to take that value down. And then on the support personnel, B402 becomes what? If we go down? B402. B402, right? Then what happens to B403? B403. It stays as B403. What happens if we move to the right? B2 becomes C2, good. And then B402 becomes C402, good. And then C403 or B403 becomes C403. So you see that? So we're basically going to take each individual cell and then we're going to take into account the mean and the standard deviation for that column in that cell. So let's autofill across. And you guys guessed it, send it down. That is pretty cool. With autofill, boom, and we just filled in 400 employees' records. So as we look at this, if we look at this, it's essentially going to be what? So we have it 0, and then this is going to range from -1 up to 1 to essentially be this bell curve. And as we sum up all these values, we get what? 2.9 times 10 to the -24, or essentially 0. Okay, so we basically normalize these. As you go across, watch what happens if you go over to the next. If you go over to the next row, it's going to be essentially kind of like the same. Okay, this is -4 times 10 to the -14. So if you look at these are all essentially going to be 0 no matter what column we have because we've normalized them. So now they're kind of like in the same relativity going from column to column. Okay, so does that make sense? It's kind of like a key important part of this chapter. Everybody's good? All right, cool. All right, awesomeness. All right, so let's go into, we're going to unhide the K distances sheet. So let's unhide this guy in here. Okay, distances. And then this is one of those, so this should look really familiar to what we did in chapter 4. And these formulas, I will admit, these formulas are pretty funky right here when you start doing the offsets. So essentially what we're doing with this formula is we're looking, does anybody remember how the offset formula works? So we're essentially going to look at a value at an anchor point. In this case, we're going to be anchored by the standardized value from B2 over to K2 from the standardized chart. And then we're looking at distances A3, 0. So what we're essentially going to do is we're looking at this value. So as we pull this down, we start at A3, and then what happens is we pull this down. A3 becomes what? A4, and then 0 becomes what? It's not a cell reference, it's just a 0. So it's going to stay at 0. Okay? And then we're subtracting that from the K standardized, the same values as our anchor point, B2 to K2. This time we're doing what? C1. So as you look at, so the way these offset formulas work is we're essentially going to look at, we're going to look at this row, this column within the values within this chart right here. And then we're going to subtract them from each other. And that's what this is going to be. We're going to take the offset value of the column minus the offset of the row. We're going to subtract them. Then we're going to square it. So we subtract it, we square it, we sum it, and then we take the square root. Okay? Pretty nutty, crazy stuff, but that's what we're doing right here. And by doing this, this is going to give us our K distances relative to each other. So we want to find out, remember, so this was just like, remember when we did the dance floor, we tried to find the boys and the girls and the chaperones? Kind of doing the same thing here, but we're trying to find these guys in groups and clusters to each other. So let's grab this formula. Now remember on this one, since we have standardized B2 to K2, and we're doing these values minus each other, squaring it, we essentially want to create an array here. And does anybody remember how we create the arrays? So if you have a formula that's not a built-in array formula like some product, we just have some. How do we make that into a array product, an array matrix? What was it, George? Control-Shift-N. Awesome, good, George, good. Yeah, so in C3, we're going to scrape this formula. And we're going to go into distances, into C3. We're going to paste this in here, and then we're going to do Control-Shift-Enter. And we expect the distance from one person to their self, from me to me, is going to be 0. So essentially what we're doing is, for example, like the distance from me to Brian, the distance from me to Ryan, the distance from me to Alex, the distance from me to George, the distance from me to Alex, and then you'd be taking, and then you do it from the perspective of Brian, and then you take the distance from Brian to Ryan, the distance from Brian to Alex to Anthony to me to George. And we're doing this for all people, and then we're going to find them out in these k nearest neighbors. So once you have this, and then notice, how do we know this is in an array formula? What went around our values now? Does anybody see that? Brackets. The little brackets, right? So that's how you know it's in an array formula. So this one we're going to move over 400 rows, or 400 columns. So bring that over to OL.
No. It just goes to, yeah.
So what happened? Did it shut down?
Yeah.
Did you have it saved?
I think like a step before.
Okay. So it's weird. It's like, it's almost like on, I think on like update days, if it doesn't finish the update all the way, they get kind of all flaky and finicky. Because we have like the Microsoft software that pushes out all the patches, and I think it could be on those days. I'll have to talk to Donald. All right, so everybody autofill over to OL and then down. Then we'll pause a second, give Brian a chance. All right, so let's keep plodding along here. So the next thing we want to do then is we're going to, now that we have, so essentially we start off with our personnel, we standardize it. Now we have the distances of each person to another person. So way back when in the Stone Age, if you wanted to go somewhere, a lot of times they had these like grids of saying, hey, if you're in San Diego and if you want to go to Scottsdale, Arizona, they had like the charts, like here's how far it is. And has anybody ever seen those matrices before, where it says you're here, and if you want to travel to there, it had the distances? That's essentially kind of what this is. So if you want to look at, you know, how far is employee 145082 to this person 142285, they're 4.9. So then what we're going to do now is we're going to group these guys kind of into neighborhoods, and we're going to say, hey, how many neighbors do you have close to you? The more neighbors you have close to you, the more you kind of blend in. If you don't have that many neighbors, now you start becoming an outlier. So that's what we're going to do next, is find the outliers now that we have this information. So let's go unhide the rank sheet now. All right, and then in B2, we're going to grab the rank formula here. We're going to put that in B2. And then now, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to rank a person to the distances for each column. So if we look at 144624, we're going to rank that person to all the other persons to see who's going to be in their neighborhood. So we're just going to get a rank now from 0 to 400. But what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 1 because we know a person's going to be in their own neighborhood. So we're essentially going to have numbers, instead of it being from 1 to 400, we're going to subtract 1 to make it 0 to 399. So let's grab this guy and put it in B2. And then change general into number. Did you guys, anybody else get true?
I got 0.
Yeah, you should have got 0. What happened there? Why am I getting a number? All right, so now once we have this, we're just going to autofill over. And we're going to autofill down. And if you look at this, if you're bored one day, you can count, and you're going to see that going across, it starts at 0, and it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 399. So it's amazing that for every row now, this is able to rank. Go look at all those numbers, rank it, do it, and then put it all in order. That quick. And then you could autofill it down, and it was able to do the same thing. Okay, so now we have each person per the rank across the row, but now we want to look at them vertically to find out the neighborhoods that each person is in. So that'll take us into slide number 16. So what we can do now is we can look at, we're going to look at K of 5. So we're going to try to find the 5 closest, anybody that has 5 close neighbors, and then 10 close neighbors, then 20 close neighbors. If somebody doesn't have 5 neighbors, maybe they're out, they're there. If somebody's not within 10 neighbors, but if somebody's not within 20 neighbors, we're going to say that's kind of like an outlier. They're just like out, out by themselves and not close to any 20 people on here. All right, so that's essentially what we're going to be doing here. And then remember on chapter 4, whatever, we started doing like the node counts. We looked at friends and Ross and Rachel and everything. Essentially what we're doing is we're looking at all the points going into a node. Okay, so we're going to copy these formulas in here down into B402. So I'm just going to cheat and type B402. Okay, so we're down here. And if you have NAs, that's fine. If you just copied it all the way down there, that's good. You're just going to copy this formula for count if less than 5. So we're going to see if anybody has, and you don't want to have the comma like I did. Okay. And then you're going to do that again, except you're going to change the less than 5 to less than 10, or you could just recopy the formula. It's the same formula. Okay, and then we'll do what I'll do this and we'll talk about it here. Okay, so essentially what we're saying right now is that this first person, employee number 144624, he doesn't have any neighbors that were within 5 of him. If you go out to 10, he has 1 neighbor. If you go out to 20, he has 1 neighbor. This person's kind of, almost like an outlier in himself. But what we're going to say for this is we're going to assume that if somebody's not within 20 of another person, that's where we're going to establish our outlierness on. So now that we have this data, we can autofill 402 and 404 over to, I think it's 09 or something, or 0 or OK. There you go. All right, and then with all this data right here, let's now conditionally format items that are 0 to be red, because we want to just quickly scan and look across 400 rows and see who's going to be an outlier in here. So we can go into conditional formatting with everything highlighted. Go into conditional formatting, highlight cells that are equal to 0, and let's say light red with dark red fill. And then now what you can do is you can just kind of scroll across. And then right here, so here's a person right here. All zeros. So we can say that this employee right here, so let's write this on the board. We can say that employee 143406, we got to go look this person up. 143406, he doesn't have anybody within 20 of him. Okay, so he's kind of like this outsider person. And if we keep scrolling over, what else do we see? Okay, there's some zeros at the top, but as you get down, you know, like this person here, 133228. They don't have 5 closest neighbors, but they do have somebody within 10 of them. They have 4 neighbors that are within 10 of them, and then within their 20 closest neighbors, there's 10 of them. So if we keep going over, so right there, if we look at 138710, they're kind of like a person. So let's see, 138710, 138710, they're kind of like on the fringe. Okay, here's another one right here, 137155. Okay, and let's keep going over. All right, that person has 4. The next person has 012. That person has 3, 143009. And have you guys saved? Make sure you save if you haven't saved. So that person has 2. All right, so let's see, 132833. So 132833. That should be everybody. So wait. 14272. 2. Right. So now what we can do is now we kind of have these 5 people flagged here. So let's go take a look at these people and see what's going on. So what you can do is go over now that we have this data here, let's go over into the support personnel tab. Then what you can do is just highlight A and then do Control F. And then let's start with 137155 because these are the 2 people that had nothing. So they had 0 across the board. Then we'll kind of look at these other ones. So let's go find 137155. So if you do Control F, find 137155. You find next, and then here we go. So let's take a look at this person. So our criteria was a person had to get 140 tickets, and then they had to have a rating of 2.0. So let's look at this person here. How many tickets do they have? 165, that's pretty good. Customer rating, woo, 4.49. This person looks pretty good. Tardies, only tardy once. Graveyard shifts taken, 3. Weekend shifts taken, 2. Sick days taken, 1. Wow, look at this. Days taken on Friday, 0%. Employee development hours, 30. Shift swaps requested, 1. And then shift swaps request offered, 7. So we can look at this employee, and what do you guys think? Is this a good employee or a bad employee? That's a really great, give this person an A. This person should be getting a bonus here, okay? This person's getting a bonus, man. All right, let's look at the next one that didn't have anything at all, which was 143406. So again, highlight A. And then we can do Control F. And we're typing 143406. All right, and let's look at this person. So 145, just barely over, okay? Look at their customer rating, 2.33. Tardies, 3. Graveyard shifts taken, 1. Weekend shifts taken, 0. Days taken on Friday, or sick days taken, 6. Days taken on Friday. So of all those days, this person's always out on Fridays doing the 3-day weekend thing. Okay? But look at this, employee development hours. How many do they have? 30. So what are these guys doing? You remember we talked about Bernie Madoff just kind of flying above the radar and not hitting a Tukey fence? So this person's smart enough to know that, hey, I'm kind of a crappy employee, but if I do enough development hours here, I'm kind of going to get along here. So and then shift swaps requested, 4. Shift swaps offered, 0. So this is kind of a person that's not a very good employee, okay? So if it's just one person, all right, maybe you lay that person off, but let's go we'll go look at one more person in here. Which one do you guys want to do? 132833 or 138? You tell me.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do 138710, and we'll come up with that. All right, so let's find this person. So 138710. In fact, maybe I'll have you guys, we'll do this one together, and then we'll have you guys do these two for homework. So I'll update the homework to have you guys do these two guys. All right. So we're going to look at 138710. 138710. Okay, and let's look at this person. Okay, so average ticket's pretty good, not too bad, 152. Look at that really good customer rating. Couple tardies, took some graveyard shifts, weekend shifts taken 2, 1. So yeah, but look at their employee dev hours. So 14, not too bad. Shift swaps requested, 2. Shift swaps offered, 0. So again, this is another person that's kind of just getting by. So if you look at this, it's almost a little bit scary that like HR could be looking at all your data and figuring out who the good people are, who the bad people are, and you guys are seeing it right here. Here's how a company could do that, just based on this data. Pretty insane, crazy, isn't it? All right. So yeah. All right. So we essentially did slide 17. So we looked at 137. It's like, yeah, this person's really good. Perhaps a promotion's in order, at least a bonus or something like that. And we looked at 18, 143, 406. We're like, this person's not doing that great. Isolated bad egg, perhaps. But we also saw a couple more in here that were just barely in there. So I'll let you guys do those two for homework. And then, so this is the first one, but now what we couldn't tell here is the relativity of one to the other. So wouldn't it be great if we could find this? Because now all we have is numbers, but we don't know the relativeness. So if we look at these three guys, so if we look at 132833, 138710, 142782, we don't know which one is closer to this bad person and which one's closer to the good person. So what we're going to do now is, instead of doing k nearest neighbors, we're going to incorporate distance. So now we have this spectrum, so we can see this continuous spectrum, so we can see how far they are relative to each other versus just a whole number. Because now we just have discrete numbers of no neighbors or one neighbor or two neighbors. What we want to do now is go actually find the distance. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing next here. So let's go into slide number 19. So essentially, that's kind of what I just said here. Using this n degree, we couldn't determine the biggest outlier. K distance provides relativity on a continuous spectrum. That's all in red, so you might see that in a bit on a quiz or something like that. All right, so let's go unhide the K distance sheet next. So we're going to go unhide K distance. Okay. And then what we want to do now is we're going to use this formula, and we're going to essentially sum something if their rank. So we're going to look at their rank, and as long as their rank, you're going to look at the rank of B2 to OK2, and then if that's equal to B2, so we're basically going to base this on the 5th neighbor. So as long as somebody has 5 neighbors in their neighborhood, we're going to basically pull up their data, and then that's going to make it either 1 or 0. And then for all the persons basically looking at their 5th closest neighbors, then we're going to add up all those distances. And then since we're doing a B2 to OK2, and then the distance is C3 to OL3, we're going to have to also make an array matrix here as well. So if we look at this, if we go down, B2 to OK2 is going to go what? That's going to go down to B3 to OK3. But B1 is always going to be locked at the top. So we always want to look at this 5th neighbor here on this sheet. And then we're going to go grab the distances from this sheet right here. So as we go down, we go from C3. So notice that if we look at the rank sheet, the value started on row 2 right here. And then on the distances, it started on row 3. That's why this is B2 to OK2, and this is C3 to OL3. Question, Anthony, or stretch? Stretch. Cool. All right, so in B4, let's copy this formula. And we're going to put that in a K distance. And then remember, we're going to do Control-Shift-Enter to make it into a matrix. Okay. And then now we can just auto-fill this guy down. I just love, I mean, isn't autofill just like the greatest thing in the world? That's crazy. And you do that and it just calculates. I mean, if you do think about this, it's like, if you think about what we just did, you just took this rank and then you compared it to distances, you multiplied them together as long as they're a 5th neighbor, and then you sum that up across that matrix. You did that for one, and then it went down the whole list. That quick. Insane. So what I like to do on these is use this red, white, and green color scale. So if we go into conditional formatting, and go into color scales, it's that upper right-hand corner one right there, the red, white, and green. And red is going to be the ones that has the furthest distance. So those are going to be the people we really want to look at. Anything that's white or green, those are all good. Okay, so we're going to do apply that. And now if we just scroll down, just kind of, look for red ones, and they'll be pretty obvious. Once you hit it, you'll be like, uh-oh, there's one. So if you scroll through, okay, so if you scroll down, where's your first kind of like big red one? You scroll down. 137,155. Oh, wow, look at that. That was our what? That was our good person, right? So that was our good person. And if you keep scrolling down, you get to what? What's another big fat red one in there? I'm sorry? 143,406. And that was our bad guy. So let's say, so 143,406 has what? He has a 4.84 distance. Okay, and then what about 137,155? 4.39. So which one's the further outlier? 143,406. So yeah, this guy's going to be closer to the better guys, and this guy clearly is kind of like this outlier at 484. Okay. but now let's go look at 132833. And we could look at one, because right now we said all these guys had the same thing. They had 001, right? So we couldn't tell which one was the best or worst out of these, but now we can, because now instead of just having whole discrete numbers, now we have this continuous spectrum. So let's go look at these guys here. So let's go into column A here. We'll do Control F, and let's go find 132833. All right, and this person has a 334. So let's write 334 here, 3.34. Okay, and then let's find 138710. 138710. Okay, so this person has 3.19. And then let's go find 142782. Okay, and this person has a 2.99. So even though these guys had the same 001, which one's the best and worst out of these? Let's say you had to lay off 2 people. Who would you lay off? So we clearly know 143406 are gone, all right? They're gone. But then out of these guys, who's the next worst one? In other words, who has the biggest scores between these guys? Yep, so you have to say, sorry, 132833, you're going to join 143406 on the curb. It's been great working with you. Bye. Here's your severance package. So can you see now? But before, when we did that first one, we just had relativeness. On this one, now we had the spectrum. So even within the same score, now you could see the relativeness of the distances. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Awesome. All right. Why don't we stop here for the day, and then we'll pick up on next Tuesday. So we'll have Thursday off for Thanksgiving. So that's all good. Okay. So, and we essentially just covered slides 20 and so you can see that 143406 is more of an outline. All right, cool. So we'll start on slide 21. And then now what we're going to do on this one is even that much better. This is based on the whole spectrum. And what we're going to look at next is this whole concept of local outlier factors. So we're going to do this LOF, local outlier factor, so that not only across the whole spectrum, but within clumps, you're going to be able to see it. So in this one, this kind of starts bottoming out. The more you get on, the more people you have on there. But doing a local outlier factor, you can have you can have tens of thousands in here. It doesn't matter. So the local outlier factor we'll find is going to be slightly better, but the good news is you can have any number of persons in there. Spoiler alert. All right, guys, that is all I've got.